start thinking about how we can use AI technology and tools at Winchester College, and how education more broadly is starting to look at how this can be used for teaching and learning. So of course ChatGPT has been in the news heavily of late, stemmed from obviously Microsoft putting huge investment into OpenAI, the developers of ChatGPT, and we're now starting to see this conversational AI integration into its search engine Bing, into its browser. The other browser called Opera has started to have it integrated into it, and also something called an API, which allows developers to link in to use this model for its products. So things are starting to take off, and of course it is relatively early days. If we move along here, you can see this is ChatGPT. These are some of the conversations I've been playing around with it, depending on what you want it to do. So it can assist, I guess, in terms of producing something like a gap fill, asking it to complete a GCSE activity on data representation. It's a starting point. It saves some of the work, can then adjust it slightly or iterate again and get something else. So a fairly straightforward perhaps use shown there. Parity bit explanation. So if I scroll up to the start of this conversation I was playing around with, so initially I asked it for 3 different levels of explanation, sort of an overview, a more detailed explanation, and an even more detailed explanation. And then what I asked it to do is perhaps think, well, if I wanted to put that onto a website, perhaps Pupil Hub, and I wanted it in a collapsible accordion style, so that I just had each description and then I could click on it and open up the description. And I've asked it to produce the code to do that, which I could then copy. And I've played around in terms of getting it to do it. It didn't do it fully. It kind of stopped. So I had to kind of ask it to do it again. And then I sort of made it so you can make sure it's suitable for a touchscreen device. And in the end, it worked well, but I did have to get it to generate the last bit properly. So it did take a little bit of conversing to get it to do what I wanted it to do. As you can see here at the end, I had to ask it to complete the script tag section, this section here, because it seemed to stall halfway. Other types of uses, more perhaps creative, I kind of asked it write a story between the bubble sort and the merge sort in the style of Charles Dickens. And then obviously in different languages, so you can maybe get it to come up with, again, the results may be variable, but it perhaps gives you a starting point or something you may be able to use as it comes. And again, getting it to come up with some perhaps questions as a way to work through a problem, depending on the subject, and then you can ask it to step through, or you can then ask it to maybe to explain it in a more simplified way to a question. Another example here in terms of ChatGPT, explain like I'm 5 how public key encryption works, and a clear sort of overview of the basics. Then I've asked it to put it into numbered steps. I can get it to mind map it, just perhaps giving me some tools that I can get the majority of the text down, and then maybe adjust it myself just to make sure it's correct. So it does need some verification and a checking process, I would suggest. Again, using it for databases, just asking it, show me the steps in a query from a single table, just so I can perhaps use that to show that GCSE an example. And then perhaps taking it further, could go, okay, look at two tables. And again, students could use it in this way as well to find out more, get them to explore a specific topic on that. Failed attempt at humour. I was trying to get this trying to see a bit more interesting. So the prompts are important using these models. you need to give it some back and forth sort of training. So I've asked it to write describing an embarrassing story about trying to teach machine learning algorithm how to tell a funny story, writing using a voice that can be described in the following way. So you've got to be quite precise in what you're asking it for, and then it comes out with a reasonable response. Then you ask it to maybe revise, perhaps with the more positive phrases, and use a rhetorical device. So if you just put something in like, write the following, then it will give you a fairly flat response. But of course, you need to be quite clear about what you want from it. And you may give something like ChatGPT in these models some of your text and then ask it to say, well, can you produce this based upon the text I've just given you? So it needs to be used well, and you need to know how it works to use it effectively, not just chuck in an essay question or a bit of a question and get a response. It may not be perfect, but a lot of these models, many companies for years have been working with these and training it not on the whole of the internet but actually training on companies' data and information so that it can answer questions better. So you can imagine linking perhaps the exam boards, linking with a history of exam questions or the scripts that they take in, scanning, converting that to text with the answers, and perhaps then having a very good data source in which it can offer marking to a question that's accurate, just for revision, or to generate some new questions for revision, and possibly in time, obviously, automatic marking with some verification at exam level. Moving along, other products available. This is more like OneNote may get to. So a place to put down notes and thoughts and things. So this is all generated by the AI tool. So I just asked it to come up with some mini project ideas for GCSE coding, just to give me some ideas, perhaps. Specifically maybe looking at one-dimensional arrays in programming, and get it to come up with some ideas of what some sort of mini projects. Again, coming up with a exam question at GCSE. I've asked it to come up with a way to sort a list of integers as an exam question. I've asked it about coastal erosion to see what it came up with. And again, you could take this as a basis and use it as a exercise and working out momentum. And again, asking it, well, can you put that into Python code, so that we could paste that into Python and they could explore, what putting in and what getting out, playing around with it, maybe then doing some graphing and playing around. So that's possible. And this is what perhaps OneNote might look like in terms of when you ask it to do things like an assistant, perhaps like the old paperclip in Word maybe came about before its time, and things will get a lot more assistive. So using them as partners in creative writing, using them as partners in places like GitHub and Replit. They have ghostwriters, so co-writers. So going further than just highlighting syntax errors or logical errors, perhaps they can perhaps autofill the code you're writing and just take some of the kind of the low-level work out of things. Also using prompts to generate some images. So this is an example of typing in, there's a prompt, which again you can get from yourself or from somewhere else. You can get these generated and get advice on how to generate these things so that we can use them in information we present to get thinking about particular topics. Meetings, I suppose, we can look at. It's already integrated with the Pro version of Teams. This kind of intelligent recap you can see here, who spoke for when and who said what, perhaps, and these things then, if there's any action points, they get put onto everyone's calendars. So a lot of admin work, that kind of work that can be automated, is starting to be automated, taking the work off of some of those roles, which is, I suppose, good. Further uses, I suppose, is just one example. This is a website called There's an AI for That, just to highlight what we can do. So Speaking Club AI, different languages. The idea is that it can provide some sort of customized learning depending on the level of proficiency or their interests about what they want to talk about. And you converse with the AI. You might have an avatar. It might just be text-based, but a place to start speaking and practicing a language. And of course, you can search and find different AIs to do different things depending on what you want in terms of need. So there's obviously pretty much an AI for most things in terms of possible uses that might be helpful. And of course, on the school website, you can imagine coming on here and having an AI-based William of Wickham that parents could interact with initially to ask questions like term dates. So rather than waiting for this to load and bounce around and then scroll down, they just go straight in and ask, what are the term dates for this year or cloister term, and they get a response. So different ways to interact with information from both the teaching dons, students, and of course the wider community. So that was just a brief tour with obviously a focus on ChatGPT, which is in the news. So resource generation as a tool to speed up and making new resources, or create variations of activities or questions for teaching and learning. Assessment, teacher-generated questions, tools like Google Classroom or Teams, they provide insights on assessed work, digital activity, and so on. So insights is a key term you'll see across many products, where it uses data and uses machine learning techniques to provide insights. That's a very big buzzword at the moment. And of course, training on exam board questions. So Seneca offers AI auto grading. I tried it several months ago for computer science, but there isn't the training there, so it doesn't work essentially, but for some subjects it might. And of course, this will develop, and it's a business opportunity for many companies. Student tracking, of course, data dashboard uses Power BI, which in turn can use AI techniques itself, and Teams similarly. Meetings, as we said, you're having one-to-ones or group meetings, team meetings, HOD meetings. We've got that transcribing and auto-summarization of what was said in that meeting. Student-wise, interacting with for learning, asking questions on a topic in a conversational way, summarizing large text, insights into learning in terms of their own learning, again through something like Teams, so you can see how they're progressing and if they're dipping, if their performance is improved or gone down. To train their own model for inquiry, which they do in JP with either text, image, or number-based. To graph single or multiple data sets without having to do perhaps all of the work they might do. To write computer code using autopilots, as I've shown. AI is already in Word, so the editor section, which is relatively new, predictive fills, checks for similar sources online, etc. That's now part of Word, so this will increase, and obviously likely to be integrated into OneNote and other Microsoft apps, as well as the Google services and other. Making notes and obviously revision, like Notion, they'll get more assisting in terms of that process. The last thing I think worth mentioning amongst all of these different uses we've looked at, from Notion to ChatGPT and the other large language models that get specialized for different companies, is, I suppose, some considerations of its use. Sources of information. How can we know the sources that have been used to generate this? Perhaps we can't. So verification, checking is needed when using this. Validity, bias, accuracy of the information in responses. Is it up to date? So we need to use this just like we do when we go to a website and we pull information. We need to go through similar measures. And the service, of course, is currently free, but it is expensive to run. So are we going to get paid premium services that are quicker, faster responding? Will there be a free version on its own, or will it just integrate into other products which we'll pay for through either advertising or directly or subscription models? What happens to your data when you feed it in? Some companies have restricted the use of this because they're not sure where it would sit and if somebody else could use prompt techniques to get access to that information. Some of it could be sensitive. And our data has been collected and used without our permission, so that's a consideration as well. And I think perhaps our biggest concern at the moment in school is the initial concerns for plagiarism. Of course, Teams does integrate. So as well as Teams in terms of the video chat, Teams does have integration with checking tools like universities use. Turnitin itself is just about to release a tool that can check for signs of AI generated text. So it doesn't solve the problem of plagiarism, but again, it's another tool to help identify potential issues. And of course, that can happen automatically through Teams and assignments and submissions. But of course, that's something we want to work on, is looking at policies, as this is obviously another tool that can be used for good, but it can be used to avoid work, perhaps from the student point of view. Thank you for listening.